Hi everyone, I'm Paul Cunningham, Director of the Data Science and AI Association of Australia. You can find me on Twitter at Paul_Cunningham, spelled Conyngham. In this episode of the Humans of AI, we feature Danny Ma. Danny is a veteran data practitioner who has seen it all in his extensive career as a data scientist and data engineer. Danny was my personal mentor at my time at Woolworths and taught me invaluable skills such as how to use Vim, along with shell tools and scripting, to dramatically increase my workflow efficiency whilst working as a data scientist. Danny has now gone big and is taking his data mentoring to a whole another level with his Data with Danny movement on social media. In this episode, we deep dive into the evolution of Danny's journey as a data scientist and his passion for mentorship and giving back to the community. We explore the pros and cons of the field of data along with Danny's personal tips to improve as a data scientist. Towards the end, we discuss challenges of finding the right mentors, Danny's take on the types of data scientists, and the future of technology. With that being said, let's get to it. All right, Danny Ma,
Hello.
thank you so much for coming on the Humans of AI, mate.
Thank you so much for having me, Paul.
So Danny and I are mates. Danny, just for everyone who's listening in, Danny is an influencer here in Sydney in the data science and machine learning community, and has a lot of very interesting insights that he's going to share today, I guess, on this current state of the industry and how to get started in the field. I guess that's you could kind of say that's your specialty. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think probably my specialty, I like to think of it as I want to try and provide a similar sort of personalized mentorship experience that I received from my mentors when I was starting in the industry, moving from data analyst to data scientist, and then working within the engineering space as well. So throughout the way, I've had lots of really great mentors who kind of taught me pretty much everything that I know. And I want to kind of do the same thing and make a huge impact by leveraging my skills and my passion for teaching other people. We can get more people in our industry, and also just to give people a bit more clarity around our areas, because there's a lot of uncertainty and doubt, especially for people who are trying to come in. So yeah, I'm just trying to help out as much as I can in that sense.
Yeah. And I think it's honestly like such a unique value proposition, really, because having a mentor, in this case you, and the service that you're trying to provide is super valuable if you're getting started out in any field, but particularly in data science. Like there's a lot of noise, and try to figure out the signal from the noise, what you should be learning, as opposed to the millions of other techniques out there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's so much stuff.
But anyways, let's get to it. So this podcast is called The Humans of AI, and the reason it's called that is I'd kind of like to hear your story and how you got involved in the field, Danny, if you wouldn't mind sharing. So first of all, just to get started, so like what sort of drew you to tech back in the day? Like how did you get involved in the tech scene? What's the story there?
Yeah, so we'll go from high school and uni. So when I finished high school, I was pretty good at math, and I had no idea what I wanted to do. I couldn't get into medicine because my medical scores were too bad or whatever. And someone threw me this thing to apply for an actuarial studies scholarship. So I applied. I managed to talk my way into the interview and into the scholarship. And so I did 4 years working in learning insurance models and all these different things which were done within the commerce and the actuarial space in the insurance industry. And I managed to get some internships there as well. And through those internships, I found that I did not want to work in insurance. I know that insurance is fun for a lot of other people, but it just wasn't for me. But the thing that I did like doing was part of the data work. So as part of the course, we had to learn a little bit of programming. Like we did a little bit of R back in the day when there wasn't dplyr or any of the nice packages. Same for Python as well. There was just nothing back then. So So
what year are we talking here, Danny?
Oh, we're talking like 2010, 2011. That was around the time when I first started just having exposure to what was going on within that space. So we would write like really, really, like imagine base R functions only, and you'd have to try and do some simulations in that, like back in the day. So it was challenging. It was fun though. And I found that I really enjoyed that more than a lot of the insurance and trying to memorize all the formulas and all those sorts of things. So I reached out to a few different people through my internships, and they somehow connected me to a guy who was working at Quantium. Quantium in Sydney is like a data consulting firm, probably one of the biggest ones in Australia. At the time, they were still quite small at the time. And I knew my manager who knew a manager that worked there, where they worked together. So I managed to just find out more about the industry, about data and where that industry was moving. And this was probably around 2011 as well. So I kind of had a relatively clear view that I wanted to move into data, but it wasn't so much about tech. It was more just about where was the world going? Oh, there seems to be more and more data being generated. Okay, people should know how to use the data, so then we can, surely there's some value in that. I wanted to put myself in that area. And I think in the insurance land and for actuaries, not many people were very strong coders. Like we would be taught maybe SAS, like really old school statistical analysis software. And that was about it. And maybe in SAS, you would write some proc SQL or something where you would do some SQL. But yeah, I think also when I was in uni, I think it was around the time when mobile apps and the iPhone and everything and all that sort of stuff was like becoming bigger and bigger. So there was always the dream of like, oh, if I just write the dream app and then I sell it to millions, I could make billions of dollars. But that never really came to fruition, not in uni.
Did you try anything to make your billions?
I remember when I finished my degree in like 2013, I was like bragging to my friends like, oh, I pirated some book on how to write some code to build some Apple app or something. So I'm going to read it on the plane when I'm flying to Hong Kong or something. And I never actually read the book. I don't even know where it is. I can't even remember the name of it, but that was about the only thing that I did. I didn't take much action back then, unfortunately. I could be a billionaire.
All right. So I guess that answers quite a few of the questions I had for you here. So you kind of got started in machine learning in the actuarial space, and that was working for Quantium. Or you got an internship, and then you started working for Quantium.
Yeah, so I had a few internships with traditional insurance companies. So think like life insurance, car insurance. And I also worked within an insurance consulting firm as well, where they were trying to build different products to try and help insurers to price their risks better.
Right.
Or different things like that. So I had exposure to what they were doing in that space, and I realized that it wasn't for me. Quantium at the time, I think it was born out of an insurance consulting firm. And then they kind of moved more into quantitative analytics and more non-traditional actuarial work, where they applied some of the same methods to try and solve similar problems just in different domains. So I found that was a nice gateway to kind of move away from the actuarial stuff, but still kind of have like a solid base from working with people who did have the same background as me. So it was quite interesting in that sense. But I didn't do any machine learning in those times. Like I probably didn't even do any machine learning in Quantium as well.
Yeah, because that was going to be my next question. When did you start getting exposed to artificial intelligence or machine learning techniques? Up until this, was it just purely coding / like writing primitive data pipelines?
So back in the day when I started at Quantium, I think they just got bought 50% by Woolworths. So my first project when I was working at Quantium was actually to work on Woolworths data, which was, we know a bit about the Woolworths data.
We do indeed.
Yeah. I think from there, I fell into it because I didn't have much preference in terms of which project I wanted to work on, which area I wanted to work in. I was just lucky that as part of the graduate program at Quantium, they just kind of put you into different areas. I think it's depending on preference. I said anything but actuarial work, and then they put me into something which was not actuarial work. So I remember some of the first questions I was being asked to answer with the data was using SQL to try and figure out, what is the what is the top performing ice cream premium brand in 2013 as opposed to 2014,
right?
Or different things like that. So very low level type analysis, but it was kind of like, it was really fun for me because it was just like problem solving just with data.
Got you. Where, it's a good place to start, really.
Yeah, I think it's, for me, when I talk to people these days who are trying to get into machine learning and the AI and all those cool sounding things, I usually say, oh, you might want to, that's really cool, but I think you need to understand how to use the data first before we jump into all those cool applications of it. I think having a good understanding of what to do with, say, data frames, for example, or SQL tables or different things like that is more useful than trying to upskill very, very heavily in the deep learning, for example.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. So I also forgot to ask you just before we started, what was your, what degree did you do at university?
So my degree, I was part of, it was actually a commerce degree. So I have a bachelor's of commerce. My majors were actuarial studies. I think overseas it's called actuarial science as well. And also economics. I can't remember if I did business economics or I think I just did a normal economics major. Honestly, I didn't learn too much. You could probably learn the same amount reading textbooks, if not more. But yeah, I think it was, at the time, they didn't have a bachelor's of data science, a bachelor's of machine learning. Do they even have that? But a few of my friends did, say, actuarial studies and maths and statistics. So they were much heavier on the math side. For me, I didn't mind doing the maths because I kind of grew up doing a lot of maths, like Asian household sort of stereotype sort of thing. But I think from I didn't enjoy the actuarial side of math because there was a lot of proofs, a lot of, so essentially in actuarial studies, you would try and prove some of the formulas that people would use in finance. And in finance, it could be for, say, trading, stock allocation, portfolio allocation. All these different things have formulas that are being used by the financial analysts. For the actuaries, they would have to try and formalize why this formula work. And it would be a component of it would be pure math. And I did not like it. I did not enjoy that component at all. It was not my forte.
Okay. So I think a common thing I'm sort of seeing here, Danny, with you is it seems like you kind of followed what you enjoyed doing. Is it safe to say that? Is that and to kind of where you, and we'll be jumping the gun again to where you are now, but I almost would say that's currently a theme that I would see throughout your career. I don't know if it's safe to say.
I've been very, very lucky in my career. I always tell my friends like, I don't know whether I was supposed to do this or whether I just kind of fell into it out of sheer luck and like dumb luck almost. But they always respond to me like, oh no, you worked to get your way there, and they try and flatter me and make me feel good about myself. But I'm not too sure. I think it's probably a mixture of both. I think my my life philosophy is like everything was supposed to happen in some weird sense of that sort of thing. So I think whatever I'm doing now, I was almost destined to do it. I just didn't know. And then things just kind of fall into place over time. And I found throughout my career, the more I kind of it's almost like let them take the wheel, and then you just kind of go along with it. But you still need to know approximately where you want to go so you can kind of guide the different variations that it could go off. I think that's the most you can do. I found every time I tried to control everything, that's when things go very badly wrong. So these days I just try and go with the flow as much as possible, but still be strong about what I want to do and just let others know about that also.
Yeah, cool.
So it's kind of like, it's a bit contradicting, but in life, many of these things happen as well.
Very yin and yang.
Yeah, totally.
All right. Okay. So, let's sort of talk a bit about now the state of the data science and machine learning / machine data engineering field in general. So this is kind of a hard question for you to answer, but worth asking because I think you can provide a very deep insight into it. So what do you think? What do you currently like the least about the current state of the field?
I think the thing that I like the least is probably around. This might be a bit controversial, but I think it's around the education of how people are being taught the skills that we are supposed to be using in our jobs, but actually a lot of the times when I review some of the education and some of the degrees and some of the different coursework that people are sharing with me through my different programs and platforms, that it usually misses the mark in one or more ways.
Mm-hmm.
And it's I'm not sure if it's maybe it's like an issue where, oh, there's so much gold here, let's sell shovels, or whether it's more around, okay, there's a lot of gold here, we should all work together so we can optimize how much gold we can get out of the ground, for example. I'm not quite sure. The cynical side of me says, oh, it seems like everyone's just trying to get in because the demand is there, but there's no supply of courses. This was like in the last 5 or so years or so, a lot more courses have come on. But I think that I don't know how useful it would be for, let's say you're fresh coming into data science. How long does it take for you to actually find the courses which actually work for you, that teach you the right things? Given that if you haven't worked in data science before, how do you know what are the right things to learn? So it's like a big chicken and egg problem. And I think it's almost our responsibility as people who are practitioners in the field, who have the expertise and who are passionate about helping others and sharing our knowledge. It's almost on us to make sure that we can spread the word and almost try our best to share the right knowledge that will actually help people to get to where they want to be in their career, especially through the education piece. So I'm working really hard on trying to figure out exactly what sort of offering I could give personally to try and fill this gap. But I think it's that's probably my main gripe. It's probably around the education and maybe some of the dogma as well. So we've seen in places where they only have one way which they do data science. There is no freedom to do data science in any other way. Most of the time we see that this is due to, let's call it, past decisions. People's heads are on the line. They can't really admit mistakes. So they just kind of pummel along the same path that they're going in fear of being found out. That's probably not the way that you want to be doing data science, especially with the science perspective, where we should always be experimenting, not just in how we use the data and what experiments and what algorithms we use, but also in the way of thinking, the processes, what tools we're using. All of this is up for experimentation.
The science word is kind of the key piece there. Then I think like the whole point of science is to test different hypotheses, right?
Yeah. So it's in a way like the other thing that I don't like about data science as a whole. I think it's less so about artificial intelligence and machine learning, but data science is kind of morphed into this thing where it's if you can get value out of the data, you too can call yourself a data scientist, which is, I think it's fine in that sense, but it talks about what definitions we have in the industry. What is a data science versus what is a data analyst versus what is a business analyst versus a machine learning engineer. And all of these things become blurry when all these different views come into the market. I think it's not so much a personal gripe of mine, but I think it's just, it makes it really difficult for people coming in because they hear all these different conflicting perspectives and it just confuses the crap out of people. It would be so much easier if there was some sort of like stricter curriculum where it's like, you must know these things in order to get this sort of certification. But then that opens up like a whole different ethical talk about, okay, who owns the certifications? Do they get money out of it? Because you see all these different accreditations in all the other fields, right? So,
and also it comes like, if you're going to be a data scientist in industry X, those same skills might not be needed for industry Y. There's also that as well. So do you think that education, I guess, is one of the better ways of addressing this problem? Like, because you've talked about a few problems here. Like you've talked about like not having the right skills for the assigned roles. You've also talked about like defining what those, like defining the actual definition of what a data scientist is versus machine learning engineer, data analyst, etc. And then you've also sort of talked about education, kind of like maybe a bridge for this. So, is there anything you can comment on around there?
I think so education should be, in my perspective anyway, education should be broad enough. So it should be broad enough, but also targeted enough at the same time. Another contradiction. So there are a lot of skills that we use in, say, machine learning and data science and software engineering, for example, which should be standardized across all of these different professions, because in the end, we're writing code and code software. We should be doing it at reasonable standards. So then we have really good processes and everything is clean and testable and all of the good stuff that comes with proper software development. I think those things can be taught at a very broad level and a very generalized thing. When it comes to domain specific knowledge, I think that's where you can really niche down depending on your interests. So if you, let's say, for example, you're very passionate about trading, you want to be able to predict when the market goes up and when the market goes down so you can get your trades in, make a lot of money. So if you're really passionate about it, then you should take your passion and with your base level of skills, you should be able to dive deep into that topic and be able to pick your way through all the different, let's say there's math and machine learning logic and algorithms that you need to use specific for finance. Then I think the level of training that we should be providing in terms of the, let's say, institutions, as well as individual course providers and influencers and whoever are making courses, they should be broad enough to give people the skills so then they can kind of go and learn whatever they want in whatever area they want. But I think the gap is right now, people may or may not know what they want to learn in terms of which area they want to go niche into. So that's one problem. The other one is also the skills that we're teaching. They might be very broad, but they're not very broad and useful to some extent. Where I think if we taught the skills which are very useful and you get a real high utility, almost like the 20% of skills that give you 80% of all the value that you might do in a data science career, those are the things that we should be teaching. Those are the things that we should be evangelizing and really sharing with other people, because those are like, I think without that as a foundation, how much do you really think you can make an impact in some of those other areas? I personally, if I didn't have my own foundation of skills that I got working with all these masters in the field, I would not be very confident myself also. And I think that kind of puts it in perspective where there's going to be that. So you must have heard of the imposter syndrome, where you're always constantly comparing yourself to others.
Of course. You're
an imposter wherever you go. I think people kind of say that kind of goes with you everywhere throughout your career. In my mind, I think it's true. It's definitely in there where you're always constantly comparing yourself. It's almost human nature to do that. But at some point in time, you realize, oh, I keep comparing myself, but am I getting any value out of constantly comparing myself? Am I using it to push myself to further heights or something? But then you ask yourself, why do I need to reach such heights? Do I need it to accomplish something that I want to do? And if the answer is no, then you go back to yourself and you say, why do I need to do all of this? And you try and inspect exactly your purpose of tackling on more skills, or why do you feel insecure about certain things? But yeah, I think this is going pretty deep, but
no, it's good.
It's a great discussion.
Yeah, it's really good. It's like, I mean, like if you're choosing, again, if you want to bring it back to data science, it's like if you're thinking about going down the road to learning this as a skill set, you have to know why you're doing it. If you can't answer that question for yourself, like, you should maybe be reevaluating it. So
yeah, there's like the famous start with why.
Exactly.
Like Simon Sinek.
Start with why, the fivefold why.
Start with why.
Why. Yeah. Okay, cool. So we talked a bit about like what you like the least. Okay, so what do you like the? Let's contrast that now with like, what do you like the most about the current state of the field? Like, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's good to start with the bad and then move to the good.
Of course.
So then it's not like a double bad sandwich. That's
Yeah.
like I think the good in the data science. I think being on so the LinkedIn community for data analytics, data science is really, really great. That is one of my I really enjoy spending my time there helping people in that community. I think that the social aspect of what we do in terms of sure, when we're working in data science, we're trying to get value for the businesses that we work with. We're trying to extract the insights. But when we think of what we do on a day-to-day basis, what are we doing? We're talking with other people. We're learning about the data. We're bouncing ideas off people. We're trying to get feedback from our presentations and our communication skills. And it's all those kind of soft skills, which we're not really taught anywhere, but you kind of learn on the job. And for me, when I think of LinkedIn and the community that is there at the moment, it's sort of like you can upskill yourself in that side of the soft skills, but you don't actually need to be talking to people in real life. Like you don't have, we don't need to be on a phone call. We could just be chatting somewhere. And that is already helping you hone in on your communication skills in the written format. I think that is probably one of the things I really enjoy about data science currently. I think it's doing really well, more so in this digital, well-connected space that we're in also. But I think from a technical perspective, where we're seeing now is that data science is kind of, we're moving towards more maturity in terms of the tooling that we're using as well. So in the past, you would have like, okay, let's go out and build an MVP model for the project or the client, and we have no idea if we can actually productionize this or put it into actual use. The MVPs would always just be kind of like a one-off shotgun, and then if it works, it's like, cool, it works. Let's go pitch for more funding so we can build it properly. Whilst these days, I think because technology is maturing and there's a lot more technological advancements on this side, we're getting to the stage where you can essentially, if you're a talented data scientist or data scientist who's good with the different machine learning engineering and the software engineering side of things, you can essentially roll out an MVP as your first production iteration. And then once it's deployed, then you can start getting real world data to then update whatever your beliefs are, improve your model, roll out different design considerations for your product or different things like that. And it's almost like the whole startup mentality, like the lean startup and being agile and doing things which might not be exactly where you want it to be at the first place, but then iterating over time. That's becoming more and more of a reality within data science. And I think that's probably a really good thing, because there's that crazy statistic, like 83% of all machine learning projects fail or something, some IBM statistic. I don't know if it's correct. Well, 9 out of 10 statistics are all wrong anyway, just like that one. So I think I think because there's been so much failure in the space, I think people have kind of learned from their mistakes and they're moving towards more robust tools, which can help them get the value out of machine learning and data science in a more rigorous format. And I think having that rigor is super important because, having citizen data scientists where people are just kind of learning data science and applying the machine learning methods, that's really good. Like we should keep fostering that sort of initiative in the community, whether it's through Kaggle, whether it's on LinkedIn and all these different things. But when it comes to using the machine learning in real world applications, there's a big disconnect between those two things. And I think the closer we can get to the end of the spectrum where we're going into production straight away with the prototypes and being able to code it up properly, that's where we will see success together as like a community and a profession, I would say.
Okay, so to kind of summarize, you reckon that where we are right now is the tools are mature, and that allows us to essentially deploy these techniques to production much quicker, allowing for essentially referring to what you said before, like the whole lean approach where you can deploy something, get feedback, and then iterate based on the feedback. So that whole cycle's essentially the loops have gotten tighter and the turnaround time's faster, essentially. Is what you're saying?
It's like the technology has finally allowed us to be able to do that looping, and the feedback cycle becomes much more quicker. And anything that we build as, say, machine learning engineers or data scientists, they need to exist not in a vacuum. Like I was thinking through this analogy where I was sort of, let's say you're a really, really great cook, but are you ever a chef unless you serve other people food? No, right? Like it's a profession. Like a chef is a profession. A cook, you might be very good at analyzing data, but you won't be a top tier data analyst unless you're doing something that makes an impact for someone somewhere. And I think we should, that's sort of my mindset coming in from that one, where it's almost, you don't need to prove yourself and your skills, but you do need to be able to use your skills to generate something. You can't just learn something for the sake of learning it.
Yeah, 100%. It's like a pro tip for learning as well is to do a project you're interested in to deliver a result, whatever that result might be. Like, okay, kind of a question in the same vein is, do you think, and this is actually, I think you might also be in the place to answer this question. What do you think are the factors that contribute to what you could call a true data scientist, as opposed to, I don't know, there's 1,000,001 people calling themselves data scientists now. So essentially what separates the signal from the noise? Do you think we need a new name for our field, or so a few questions there.
I would say that I'm firmly on the fence for this sort of debate of whether you can call yourself a data scientist, or whether you call yourself a data scientist, but you're a fake data scientist, or whatever it is. I think in the past, when I was moving through the ranks, I remember when I asked my boss if I could get the data scientist title and they approved it, I was so happy. I was like literally like jumping for joy sort of thing. Because back in the day, I personally thought that I needed the title to legitimize whatever skills that I have. These days, I think honestly that has not changed. Like it's one of those things where if you have it on your resume, you instantly get some real value out of it. So that's why it creates a really large incentive for people to go after that title. And it gives companies a lot of incentive to actually dish out those titles. So then they can, it's like demonstrating that you have value doesn't mean that you have value sometimes.
Got you. Understood.
I think.
Yeah, understood. So essentially, you're referring to social signaling in a way that we're doing data science too.
Yeah, exactly. From a company perspective. And
yeah.
But having those different incentives clashing it makes the system very complex. And I think the people who suffer from this level of complexity are the people who are coming in and they see all these job titles like, well, I think I saw one recently. It's like entry-level data scientist requires 7+ years of experience and a PhD. Like, okay, great.
Yeah, right.
I really think that I heard in Google, right? So the larger tech companies, Google, for example, there's like someone can correct me if I'm wrong in terms of whether this is true or not. But there's no data scientist. There's software engineers and there's analysts, quantitative analysts, for example. You're one or the other. There's sort of like, yes, the analyst will still be doing software engineering to be able to hit the different systems where the data live, all these sorts of different things. Yes, the software engineers will still be doing some analytics because they need to figure out how their app is performing, whether their feature is performing, all those sorts of things also. But they're kind of like two distinct fields where one group is trying to analyze the data in terms of like trying to understand what's going on. And the other one might be trying to productionize the data or do something at scale. That's how I think of the two sorts of roles. Within data science, you also hear there's the type A data scientist and the type B data scientist, where the type A is for the analyst and the type B is for the builder. And that kind of matches it more or less, like almost in parallel. It's very close to the sorts of skills that people need. But But
what do you mean by builder? Like someone who's trying to do applied machine learning, for example. So you're doing, I don't know, data science over satellite imagery for a farm or something.
yeah, I think it would be. I think of it more like the original gangster style data scientists, where you think of the original data scientists were born out of the big tech companies.
Yep.
So you'd have like Facebook, Google,
Mm-hmm.
LinkedIn, where the data scientists they were hired out from their PhD programs or their masters in some sort of research area. And then they were literally brought in by the business to try and solve some problem by doing some modeling of the data. So trying to get some insight out of this mess of digital data to then try and use that to actually drive the product forward. So for LinkedIn, it would be the LinkedIn, the network for LinkedIn. For Facebook, it would also be the network for Facebook. For Google, it would be PageRank for, you get the point, right? There's all these different machine learning based products. And I think when I talk of the type B data scientist, they are the people who are working on those sorts of things. So yes, there's still a component of them having to analyze the data, but their cornerstone is in building those products. And I think that products is the important word for that one.
Okay, cool. With regards to, I guess, since I've never heard these terms before, type A and type B, which of those two fields do you think is growing at the moment?
So there's no inherent differences in value for each one. Like they're almost like different. If people were tools, there would be different tools that you kind of deploy at different times to get you a certain result. So
Sure.
your type A data scientist, for example, you kind of send them in there when you have no idea what's going on. You need clarity. There's a mess. There's
so we're talking, just to be clear, analytics here. Like
it's almost like I think of type A data scientists as your data analyst on steroids, like just pumping it. So they would be able to, yes, they can analyze the data from wherever it comes from, but then they'll have some of the software know-how to actually do it at scale. So maybe they write complex programs to auto magically generate many dashboards based off different types of data inputs, something where it's almost like a system where you're generating automated insights, for example. So there's the type A data scientist would also be your statistician types. So they'd be the ones running experiments, trying to figure out where to go. If we've done something like this with the predictive models, how do we know that the predictive models are working? What sorts of experiments can we design to actually get that, get a quantitative measure for whether this works or not? I think I don't know if I forgot your original question, but in a nutshell, it'd be
which type A or type B, which one's growing? Which industry do you think, like if you were to get started now, where would you think about sort of honing your set of skills so that you can apply? Yeah, you got me.
Yep. Understood. I think so. Type A would be more around like super data analyst. Think of that style. The type B is almost like your software engineer who loves the data science, who wants to apply the machine learning algorithms and the different things. These days, what we're seeing is that the type B data scientist is rebranding themselves as machine learning engineer. So, but using more tools, more engineering principles, and probably that everything's being done in the cloud, being deployed on Kubernetes or whatever it is. There's, I think that's where the type B, there's a lot of growth there because it's kind of transformed itself into its own different genre of roles, essentially. I talked about this previously as well, where I think there's also a type C. So I made this up myself. So it'd be like type A is for analyst.
Please do enlighten Danny.
Yeah. So type A would be analyst, B would be for builder, and C would be consultant.
Gotcha.
So you've probably worked with quite a few consultant type data scientists where they're not necessarily very hands-on, but they can do the hands-on work. But they're there to drive strategy. They're there to, given that we have these experiments results, how can we use that to actually drive the business in the right way to actually get the thing done, to improve the business value or whatever it is. I think originally I always thought of data science as a more consulting style practice, but over time I've realized that the consultants who are working within the data science space are like a different breed of animal. They're the ones who are much more focused on interpersonal relationships, the being able to influence stakeholders. So in the past, like, you know how there's the data scientist is the midpoint of hacker, business person, and software engineer. Oh yeah. So I think that all of those different skills come from the A, the B, and the C. Mm-hmm. So when you influence people, I think that's purely almost a consulting skill where you're trying to, here's what we found, here's how we can apply it.
Right. So would you say that the C role is like kind of like a data scientist manager in a way?
Yep.
Like
pretty much. I think it's if we think of, so traditionally in data science, you'd have like, okay, when you have enough years on the board, you become a manager. You go and manage teams of people to do the same thing that you have. More often than not, the people who have come through the ranks of data science, they may or may not have the right management experience to actually do that and to drive projects. What we're seeing is it might be better if you have cross-functional teams where you essentially have maybe they're not a technical data science person, but they've worked with technical data scientists before and they know exactly, like they might not be able to code up everything, but they know where and when they should be applying different things. They know the trade-offs between different things, whether they can optimize a machine learning algorithm for a certain CV or different things like that. It would be really cool if they could, but chances are they may or may not have that knowledge. But they're better at, in terms of the communication, people management, project management. I think all of those things are coming in. And what we're seeing now is people who want to make a career transition without the technical background, it makes a lot more sense for them to try and transition into this type. But there's another chicken and egg problem where if you haven't worked on data science problems before, you will not know what you're doing. So it's very hard to fake these sorts of skills.
Yes.
And
yes, having seen a lot of this in my career personally as well, I couldn't agree with you more, Danny. All right. Okay. So again, I think you are in the prime position to answer this question. So if you are just starting out as a data scientist, what do you think are the best ways to improve?
Great question. I think the first thing that I would do is, or the first thing I did when I was learning, apart from learning SQL and being pretty decent with the data. So I think that is your step one.
Step one, decent with the data.
Yeah, get good with the data. Being able to manipulate it, being able to run. Pretty much think of you're the programmer, you're the puppet master, and the data is your puppet. You need to be able to get the data to do what you want it to do. Slicing, dicing, filtering, whatever. You need to be good at doing that in whatever language best suits you. So if you want to do it in Python, go ahead and do it in Python. I suggest people to do it in SQL because what we're seeing in the industry is that almost everyone has their data in an SQL database, in a database, on the cloud database, or different things like that. So it's a very useful skill to have to be able to write SQL properly because it's very transferable. It will help you get a job. When I think of the next thing to learn after all those things, I'm a bit harder on this stance, but I would teach people how to use the command line. Being very comfortable in the command line, in the terminal, in the command prompt is super, super important, especially as you go on to work on more complex projects where you have version control and you're using GitHub and all these different things. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you really need to know the command line. I would say you can't really be a data scientist unless you're working with the command line, because how else would you do things? Using GUIs all the time? It's not it's not the same.
It's not fast. It's you feel like you have superpowers if you know what you're doing on the command line.
And I think getting to the stage where you know what not to do on the command line, like don't try and RMRF your home directory or different things like that.
Right.
Try to I remember when I was first learning, and then I was talking to like a senior guy, and then I was like, oh, I don't know what this file is and what's going on. He's like, oh, just cat this file. You should be able to see it. I thought to myself, what the hell does a cat have to do with this? And I didn't know what was going on. When you cat a file, you print out its content directly in the terminal. So I think, yeah, just being able to do simple things like that to quickly get around your computer, get around different systems, to SSH into different systems.
Yep.
That's what we do in the real world when we're working in data science in corporations. And it's just not taught. Like not many people think that it's one of those like hidden secrets, like a dark, dank secret where it's like, every data scientist needs to use command line, and everyone gets surprised because they're like, oh, what do you mean? I thought we had GUIs for everything.
Jupyter notebooks for everything.
Yeah, Jupyter notebooks or whatever it is. Or the one thing that I hate, like another really bad thing, is the terminal in Jupyter notebooks. Like, you know how you can have a separate terminal?
Yep.
It's not the same. Not all terminals are made the same as well.
Yes, 100% agree with you. So step 1, get good at manipulating data. Step 2, get good at the command line. Is there a step 3?
So of course people will say like, learn the maths and stats and learn the Python and the object oriented. And I think don't worry too much about that stuff. Start using your skills to work on projects. Project-based learning is like gonna trump 99 times out of 100 with high confidence. And I think that if you can find a project that you're passionate about, it gives you a bit more drive to actually continue working on it when times get tough also. I think even so, the thing with projects is people always get really caught up on, I don't know if this is the right project that I should work on, or how do I know if I feel passionate about this project? The only way to know whether you're going to feel passionate about different projects is to work on a few projects to find out what projects you're going to be passionate about. It's a big ask to try and to ask of yourself, let's work on a project. I'm only going to work on the thing that I'm passionate about.
Yep.
It's difficult. Like it's like telling 18-year-old self, go and find your purpose and your passion. At 18 years old, you don't know what your passion is, or maybe you do, but
not enough reference experiences.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So cool. So we got get really good at manipulating data, get good at the command line, and then work on projects that you're passionate about, essentially.
Yep.
And then I couldn't agree more, Danny, on those 3 things. To be honest, like if I was to do it again, that's exactly what I would do. Yeah. All right. Okay. So this is something that you know a lot about as well. Again, straight up your alley. So how important do you think it is to find a mentor when you are starting out in data science?
I think it's very, very important. But on the flip side, I've also heard of very, very bad experiences where people stumble upon an anti-mentor, where they think that, so it's like, it's the mentor from the dark side, which you don't want. So you learn some skills, but whether it's the way that you should be doing some of those skills is questionable. So again, it's another chicken and egg thing.
Right.
So if you don't have much experience, how do you know whether your senior or your mentor is telling you the right things? You don't. So the most important thing is to I think to take all pieces of advice with a grain of salt. Usually there's a saying where it's like all advice is autobiographical. I think I said that right, where the person giving advice is usually giving advice in the form that they would have liked to have received the advice when they were in the past. So it'd be like you're talking to your past self and giving yourself advice. So I think if you can see past that and try to understand where people are coming from in terms of where they're helping you, I think that's really important. It's like a meta step when you're trying to find a mentor. But I think in terms of mentorship and how important it is, so before I started doing my personalized mentoring thing where I'm trying to help a lot of people by trying to provide that sort of experience, I think I was incepted by by Robert Greene in his books. I think I was reading Mastery on repeat on my Audible or something. So one of the key quotes in there is he always talks about, masters throughout history, they've almost always had a mentor to save them time, to give them guidance, to give them almost like a model of how they should behave. But a lot of the time what we see is a lot of those great masters will usually take the learnings from their mentors. And there's a saying in the book also where it's like, it's a master or something around like being, you're a bad pupil if you don't surpass the master. So in a way, when I think of mentors, like I don't think I've surpassed my mentors in any way because they are amazing at what they do. But I can, yeah, but I think it's a great goal to be able to take their knowledge and assimilate it to what you're doing and give it your own unique spin. So then you try and use those skills in something which is uniquely yours. And then you surpass anyone who's trying to do the same thing as you. Absolutely. In the same way as you, because no one can. So I think it's like having that sort of awareness in terms of when you're trying to find a mentor, when you're trying to get the value out of some sort of mentorship is super important. People also talk about mentorship as like it's a two-way street. So the mentor has to get something out of you as a mentee and all these sorts of different things. I don't buy into it. So
I don't agree either. Yeah, I think I don't actually think if you're going to make a list of things to find, like you said, there's the dark side mentors, and I don't know what it's called, the light side. One thing I'd say is that from really great mentors that I'm lucky to have in my life, it's almost like they're giving advice and they want nothing back.
Exactly. And I think that's the sort of so in the past, right? When I think of the Robert Greene book, when he talks about mastery, a lot of the masters in the olden days, when they took on an apprentice, they would think of them as an apprentice because they were going to be their understudy. Like, say, imagine like a classical pianist who plays a lot of really intense things, does a lot of composing. They will take on an understudy who is supposed to take on their work and surpass them, or kind of like work through as their understudy. I think mentorship is a bit different to that. It's not quite the same. Mentorship is where I think the mentor has to be, it's almost like when I try and help people and spend my time to help other people, I'm literally spending time from my life. Like I'm dedicating my life to helping other people. Whether I need anything out of a certain relationship in terms of with a mentee, I don't think so, because that's sort of putting it in the wrong light. It's sort
100%.
of
doing it for the wrong reasons.
Yeah. And it in a way, it almost bastardizes mentorship as a concept. It's like, oh, you only go in and be a mentor if you can get something out of your mentee. No, it doesn't work out. It doesn't make sense. So I think of it as there's a lot of people out there who would love to be mentors, but they have other responsibilities, and that's cool. Like there's being able to help people and spend time with them and actually work through their problems. It takes a lot of time. The challenge for some of the people like me who's trying to do the mentorship is there's a lot of time challenges, and anything where I can try and scale myself out to try and do something to impact many more people is very valuable for me. So I think that's why I try and go live or go on different interviews with yourself and other people to try and just get my views and my experiences out so more people can hear it. And if they think that it's interesting, then they can join my platforms or join me on the Slack, tune into my future lives, and hopefully I'll be able to help them in some way. And I think that's, you're so right in saying that the best mentors that I've had were just people who just wanted to help others. Like they actively went out of their way to help you, to make sure that you were doing the right things, not always the right things, but as long as you were improving yourself. So I think some of the best mentors that I've had were light touch mentors, where they would only give me advice when I asked them.
Yeah, and I 100% agree. 100% advice when you ask. It's that old adage, like help people when they only help people when they ask for help, essentially.
Yes,
and
so true.
And the other thing is, giving help but not expecting anything in return. There's also a lot to be said about those two things.
Definitely.
So I guess if anything, those may be potentially two ways to screen for mentors. Yeah. Moving on to talking a bit about the field and then wrapping this up a bit. I guess the machine learning, data science, data engineering, it's been a rapidly moving field over the last 10 years, the last 5 years especially, but the last 10 years, it's kind of come out of nowhere almost in a way. I mean, it's been boiling away for a while, but it really, really took it to the next level. Where do you think the next obvious opportunities lie? Is it what we talked about earlier with type B and type C data scientists, or are there any other obvious opportunities that you'd like to talk about now?
So probably you might have seen the releases of like GPT-3 and all these different things in terms of the natural language processing.
Yep.
I do believe that natural language processing and the automation of how we're actually asking for information, that will be a big thing.
Mm-hmm.
So think of it as, let's say you talk to some voice thing and you tell it to get you sales over time for a certain product. And that thing can then just write a query, hit the database, and return you data visuals. I think that's pretty cool. And I think that's going to become more of the norm. So think of it as like you're Iron Man and you have Jarvis everywhere for everything that you can do. And your data, as long as you're well connected, of course, there's data privacy and all these other issues in terms of whether we should even be tracking different sorts of data. But sooner or later, all the IoT and all the sensors and all the different things will give us so much data that we will have like no idea what to do with it. And I don't think people, let's say in the industry, for every person who might want to, let's just say for consumers, for example, let's say for every consumer that wants to use their data, do you think they're going to learn SQL to actually get their data and analyze it? No, right? So I think there's a market for products for consumers, which will consume their data and give them insights about their life, about their patterns, about how they can optimize their life. That's always going to be a thing. Now it's just more quantitative and tangible in terms of data. I think another thing would be now that there's so many companies that are using machine learning, we've talked about this previously, but I'm sure that there's going to be there'll be not an AI winter, but it'll be kind of like an AI, I would call it a storm, where it would be, okay, all these companies have started implementing AI. Who's going to keep them in check? How do we know that they're using it ethically? How do we know that they're using the right data points and not biasing anything? So I think another area of the industry will be moving into audit of applied machine learning. I think that's going to be a big thing. It will pick up more press coverage because every time you hear like a bad usage of machine learning, it trumps like 100 good uses, like hundreds of thousands of good usages. Yep. And it's like a reputation risk if you're running a company, for example. Like all it takes is just one bad tweet and you could destroy yourself. And I think having, that will be a very big focus. So I think an opportunity there is for anyone who's learning data science and machine learning to learn best practices from the beginning, from the get-go. Of course, we try and hack a lot of things that we're working on, but from an ethical perspective and the applied perspective, being able to, it's more around the soft side of how to apply the machine learning. You literally just need to read a book or you read an article about how not to do machine learning, and you pretty much know it. Like there's the learning curve is not very steep, but I think it will become more and more popular over time as people realize that there are all these different potholes that we should avoid when using the machine learning.
Right. Okay. So two things. The one was the querying of and ingesting of data, natural language processing potentially being a subtopic of that. So that's one opportunity. The other one being auditing of applied machine learning. Is there anything else that comes to the top of your head?
Probably the robotic side will be interesting as well. So as we see more and more of, let's say, like the reinforcement learning and the Q learning and the different things where you can actively teach the algorithm to do something and optimize over a certain point in time. So say like self-driving cars, for example, is a good example of that. We'll see more and more of those coming into the industry, probably in like 5 to 10 years time.
5 to 10. I think that's roughly right.
It's roughly the right time. Like I can imagine like robots that will automatically cut your veggies or something. Something which is like safe.
Clean the house.
Yeah, robots that clean the house. Or I've seen like Steve Nuri is posting up videos of like a robotic dog that replaces your dog. Well, your dog is super cute, by the way, in the background. I think,
yeah.
yeah, they're having. I think that there'll be a lot more robotics initiatives coming out, like lots of new things. Whether it's a good area for people to focus on in terms of learning and studying to get into that field, I'm on the fence. So maybe it's a good thing to get exposure to, but whether you jump straight into all those really hardcore deep learning techniques, I'm not quite sure. Chances are the people who are going to be developing those products, they'll come from a research background or something where they have really in-depth experience in there, so they know what they're doing. Of course, you'll get like like an outlier every now and then where they just kind of citizen machine learning expert who builds the next thing, like a data robot, for example, where it just becomes huge. So there's like nothing is out of the possible, but if you're going to play by the percentages, you should try and focus on building a really good foundation, and then you can decide where you want to go later when the opportunities arise. So I would say that there's a big opportunity now in, let's say, 2 to 5 years time to build a really strong base. So then when you have the inspiration or the serendipity to actually go after something that you're really passionate about, then you can do it. But if you don't have those foundational skills, you'll need to hire people, you need to bring other people on board. You just won't have those execution skills. And in this game, execution is everything. Ideas are a million.
Yeah, speed is 100%.
Yeah,
100%. All right. I think you've covered a lot of things I'd like to talk about anyway. So I guess just to sort of bring this to a close, is there any exciting things that you would like to like any things on the horizon that you would like to share? Or
yeah, for sure. So at the moment, I've been doing live streams on YouTube, and I recently got activated on LinkedIn, so I'll be doing live streams on LinkedIn as well. I've got a community with a community hashtag on LinkedIn, which is Data with Danny, all one word.
Yep.
So people can follow that hashtag. They can find me on, I think, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn with the same profile name, so Data with Danny. I've got a Slack group with, I think now there's like over 500 odd people who are, it's awesome. It's really fun. It's a really cool group. We try and keep the vibe very nice and chill so people can ask whatever questions that they need to better their understanding of the data and whatever they're doing.
Yep.
So, I highly recommend people to check out my profile. There's links everywhere. I think I've got like a link on my YouTube, a link on my Instagram, and everything kind of signs you up for that one. And once you sign up, you get a Slack join link, and then you can jump right on. I'm also right now I'm focusing full time on trying to prepare something which I'm trying to scale out in terms of the personalized mentorship in the way that I think personalized mentorship should be within the space, within the education space. I don't want to announce it just yet. There's still a little bit more work to go before I can make the full launch, but just watch this space.
Interesting.
It'll be coming soon.
All right, guys. Danny Ma, everyone. Hashtag Data with Danny. It's been a pleasure to have you on the podcast, Danny. And let's do this again sometime.
For sure, Paul.
All right, cool.
Thanks so much for having me.
Cheers, mate. Bye.